Catus Maximus here, this time with a review of the Icon short stem or short pattern hex socket set. I went ahead and broke down and bought these. I had broke one earlier. Surprisingly left on a recalcitrant 8mm bolt on a bicycle crank. And they were charging 25 bucks a set, which is actually a pretty reasonable price. Overall, the quality does seem to be pretty decent on these, although I do have a few criticisms. And we'll just get those out of the way. One of which is obvious is that the 3mm for some reason is actually significantly shorter than all the rest of them. And it was like that in the other packages on the shelf. And that must have been like a specification defect or something, because on the fractional ones of the Imperial, the smallest size is indeed the same length, but for some reason on the metric, it ended up short. So I thought that was just a bit of a short side on quality control. Also, sizing on these seems to be pretty decent, but it's not perfect. If we get this going here, we can measure the 3mm. Actually, that one's measuring out pretty darn good. Let's take off this one here, see how we do. They were a little undersized. These short stem ones actually seem to be a little bit better. The 6mm only 5.96. What if we go all the way up to the 10 here? Yeah, surprisingly enough, it appears that the short stem ones are actually more precisely sized than the long stem units, which is a little bit interesting because the long stem units were running about 1/10 of a millimeter undersized. So at least that's something good to see. They must have been using a different stock that had a better precision. Now, besides the metric and fractional straight stem, they also have ball versions, and this was another criticism, was that in all the long stem, the 32 pieces of long stem that they have, they're all the same length, they're all 3/8 drive. On the short stem straight flute ones, they're also all 3/8, except for, and almost all the same size except for that odd 3mm. But when you get into the ball end shorts, they are in these odd configurations with 4 3/8 and 4 1/4" drives. I should mention though that the cases that these come in for 25 bucks, actually the case is really handy. It's perfect for 9-inch Sawzall blades. So I think that's at least a little bit of a bonus, just because those cases are handy. Before I get into the negative of why is this odd, why do they have just in the short stem balls, they are these combination 3/8 and 1/4". I would have preferred them to also all be 3/8, that way it was consistent. And then they should have had a 1/4" set of straight and ball ones that maybe wasn't as comprehensive. Instead of 8-piece sets, they could have had, say, 6-piece sets of each, or had a 12-piece set of both metric and fractional ball and straight in 1/4", rather than kind of just making it mix and match, which is a little bit odd. Although I appreciate these would actually be my only 1/4" ball hex sockets. It's still just a little bit weird for them to break up the sets like that. I did want to point out here, let's take a look at a couple of these, is that they seem to have done a pretty good job, but it's still, there's some pretty distinct flats on the ball end here, and it shows just a little bit of a lack of precision. Some really nice Allen wrenches. There'll be almost no peak. It'll be just a really nice sphere. So that little bit of a flat will make them just a little bit chunky when you are using the ball ends in a fastener. You know, it's kind of a double-edged sword, because a little bit of an extra flat area helps reduce the chances. There are many, you're not supposed to use ball ends to actually break these socket head cap screws. They're often very tight, and this reduced cross section on the ball end is really likely to shear off. But there are many times, it seems like on Volkswagens and stuff, where you just, in many machine tools, where you really need that extra angle, and you just have to make that gamble of trying to break the fastener. And the extra flat may help with that, but the converse is when you're using it as the kind of universal joint, it gets a little chunky. There's, you know, just a lot of bumpiness, and it just doesn't run quite as smoothly as it could if they had a little bit better job rounding that. And what's interesting is if we look at the 1/4" here, we can see that they actually, like this one right here, this 5mm is perfect. You can see that there is a really nice radius there. So it's kind of interesting that the 1/4" are machined a little better than the 3/8. And you notice that when you're using the ball ends, because this one, is way smoother. It's really surprising. You can just see that in my finger there where it's barely bumping around at all. And that's exactly how they're supposed to operate. And it's really surprising how having just a little bit of an extra flat, just like this has, not much, can really make for a much more chunky kind of operation. You can just see how that's cogging over. It really just wants to be in there straight. And that's why I try to get into these details in these reviews, because that's the type of stuff that you will notice. You're like, oh, I keep on using this socket and it just feels so crunchy using it. It's because it has a small difference where they just didn't round it out quite as well as they could have. But I still bought them anyway, just because Harbor Freights are very prevalent, they're very convenient, and even after this disaster in 2020, many disasters, that they are a company that's still going to be around and is going to be around for a while. So kind of like the new Sears, where if I break one, I know I can just go in there and swap it out. I know Home Depot and a lot of other places with their house brands will do that too. But it's kind of nice. Harbor Freight has a variety of stuff, and they make it just, most times it's no questions asked. They just see the broken tool, and you grab one off the shelf just like it was Sears. And quite frankly, for $25 a set, these are actually pretty reasonable for S2 steel hex sockets, and definitely are pretty handy in a variety of situations. Really handy, and much better than trying to use Allen L wrenches in many situations. I love L wrenches and have a pile of them, of course, but with the sockets, of course, you could use breaker bars and ratchets and all the other kind of stuff with them. So maybe the next hex drive tool I'd recommend outside of having a regular set of L wrenches. And once again, at least they're reasonably priced at Harbor Freight for some pretty decent ones, even if the ball ends aren't quite perfect. Anyway, I hope everyone's staying as healthy and as safe as they can out there. And I really appreciate everybody who's been watching and subscribing to the Catus Maximus channel. And if you haven't subscribed, please do. Until next time, Catus Maximus out.